called Cambodia has for generations been renowned for its incomparable beauty. With its handsome people, the flowering trees that line its roads, its architecture and its sculptures, the capital city of Phnom Penh creates an illusion so grand, so beautiful, that it has been called the Jewel of the East. But today the illusion has been shattered, the jewel stolen. In the traditional dance, we can still see the grandeur of the past. For the past 2 decades, the people have experienced mostly horror and tragedy. They've been pushed to the very brink of existence. Today, the horror is past. The tragedy has ended, at least for now. And the Khmer people are determined to turn back from the brink and repossess the stolen jewel of their culture. Today, the famous pagodas, with their intricate handwork and stylized roof lines, have mostly fallen into disuse. In fact, most of the pagodas in Cambodia have been destroyed by the series of recent wars that have wrenched the country into total collapse and brought untold disaster to its people. For many years, the country was a French colony. Old roof lines somehow fit well into the tropical landscape. But since 1953, Cambodia has been independent, a non-aligned neutral nation. Under Prince Norodom Sihanouk, a development drive was begun, and the country reached out to the west. This brief experiment is today exemplified by a modern unused sports stadium in Phnom Penh. During the United States war with Vietnam, Cambodia remained neutral, but neither side recognized this, and its strategic position was exploited by both. When the Americans left, 250,000 Cambodians had already been killed, and the country was in shambles. With the Americans out of the way, the Khmer Rouge soon routed the government forces and marched into Phnom Penh. With Pol Pot's proclamation that it was year 0, the Khmer Rouge began forcing the people to leave the city for the country. Kampuchea was to be reformed into an agrarian collectivist state. The deaths and horror would increase. All vestiges of development or modern influence were dismantled or destroyed. Electricity was unnecessary in the new society, so wire was removed to be used for something more productive. Heavy equipment for road building and irrigation canal construction was destroyed. Such work was better done manually, said Pol Pot. Automobiles were disabled and piled into junkyards. People should walk, not ride, was the dictum, for the auto was much too modern an innovation. Bridges built for the automobile were destroyed. Banks were demolished. In the new Kampuchea, they wouldn't be needed. Under Pol Pot, there wasn't even an official currency. Rice became the medium of exchange. But the greatest tragedy was the destruction of the people. Educated people weren't needed after year 0, so they ended up here. They were often stunned by the blow from an axe handle to the neck, then buried alive in mass graves. Those who spoke a foreign language suffered a similar fate. They might be foreign agents. And others also were destroyed. Government workers, factory workers, doctors, lawyers, managers, the old. An estimated 1/4 of the population wasted in the name of ideology. The Khmer people described the past 150 years with the phrase, "Chajong." It means ridden on and kicked. Vietnamese forces entered the country in 1979, driving Pol Pot into the mountains near the Thai border. A new flag and brightly colored banners were unfurled, symbolizing the new government under Heng Samrin, and the world began to learn the awful truth. Kampuchea as a nation barely existed. An international relief effort was begun, composed of intergovernmental and voluntary agencies from around the world. The task was enormous. Communication systems were non-existent. Transportation systems had collapsed. One of the first priorities was medical care. In Svay Ring province, the Parrot's Beak section where U.S. troops first invaded Kampuchea secretly, landmines still claim a bloody toll, especially among the children. The fields surrounding the towns were mined by virtually every army to fight here: the U.S., North and South Vietnamese, Khmer Rouge, and the Army of Kampuchea. But no one has cleared the fields. No one even knows where the mines are located. But the children of Svay Ring find them when they go out to play or work the land. In the provincial hospital, they receive care. It is a hospital without running water, no sanitation facilities, and a portable generator that can provide electricity for only a single room at a time. Dr. Ingvar Heddenborg of the International Red Cross cares for the children.
One of them died immediately on arrival. One of his leg was cut off, and he had probably bleeding shock. He died of that. And that was that little fellow, and that fellow, and the third one, which is in the operation theater now, with both his arms almost cut off. But all right. Well, we cleaned up the wounds and put on saline compresses, made plaster of Paris, and let it be there. And then after 3 days, we open up and clean the wounds again. And now we can see that the wounds are healing up quite good. This little fellow was together with an ox in the fields. The ox was exploded by a mine, and he got a splitter in his medulla here. And he came in with the risk of having a paresis down. And just at that time, we had a surgeon who was a specialist in orthopedics. And he opened up the vertebral column and removed the split, and now the boy is walking and doing fine. And that's a very difficult operation, really. He did a very good job.
Besides the wounded children, other health problems affect the general population. Jean Clouveau, a field worker in Kampuchea, explains that medical supplies have gone to the provincial hospital through the World Council of Churches and the Christian Conference of Asia. Christians in nearly every part of the world have helped underwrite this effort, and also the re-establishment of a pharmaceutical plant in Phnom Penh. It now supplies essential medicines, eliminating the need for expensive imports.
That there has been a Swedish team working in Svay Ring, and this Swedish...
At first, food was as important as medical care. During the war, the rice fields were battle zones. When the war stopped, the irrigation canals had been mostly destroyed, and there was no fuel to run the pumps. Food production had been impossible for years, and the Khmer were starving. So food became the top priority. With the ports non-functioning, no trucks, and a depleted labor supply, getting food into the country was a monumental effort. Slowly, the ports were reopened, unloading conveyors installed and rice donated. Tons and tons of rice loaded onto more than 1,000 donated trucks. The trucks took it inland, where it was loaded onto ox carts to be carried to its final destination to be distributed. Today, some rice fields are again in production, with more being readied as canals are repaired and fertilizer and fuel to run pumps is distributed. Fertilizer and other agricultural materials are becoming more available, much of it donated by a variety of agencies. These inputs have helped agricultural reconstruction make rapid headway. Today, people talk and laugh as they work. Under Pol Pot, families were divided. Men and women were separated and forced to work excessively long days in the sun. Food was scarce. They frequently died from exhaustion and malnutrition. Now it is much different. The availability of seed and the relative peace in the countryside have brought hope to the Khmer people. The international relief effort has helped make the difference. John Kelly, in charge of the United Nations program in Cambodia, describes the changes he has seen.
People are no longer dying as they were dying 2 years ago, when we saw in the newsreels, we saw in the films, we saw in the newspapers the skeletons of people pulling themselves out of this country for help. That is all over. People are no longer dying. There is no longer a famine. There is no starvation as such. There has been, in fact, a miraculous recovery. That doesn't mean to say that everything is fine. By no means, by no means. It is certainly not an affluent society. People here are living in really abject poverty.
Today, as a century ago, the ox cart remains the primary means of transporting goods and supplies. Many ox carts were destroyed during the wars. Metal wheel rims and axles are in short supply. Quantities of these are being imported by Church World Service to enable the slow hand production of new wheels. More ox carts are badly needed to move relief supplies from town to village and rural produce from the country to market.
The survival of the Khmer culture and the Khmer society depends upon its independence and the restitution of its capacity to be self-sufficient. So that food is not enough. Food production has to be the ultimate goal. And as
Paul McCleary, Church World Service Executive Director, says that due to the overwhelming needs in Cambodia, 5 other organizations banded together with CWS to form ARC, Action for Relief and Rehabilitation in Cambodia.
But in Cambodia, farmers alone can't move back to the land and begin farming. The irrigation system as a system has to be reconstituted. The livestock in the country, which constitutes the backbone of the agricultural sector, needs to be restored to health.
Before the various wars have overtaken this country, there were something like 2.5 million of such draft animals. The number is now reduced to 850,000. The Church World Service has taken the initiative in drawing attention to this problem in order to try to build back the herds, which is so necessary for the ploughing of the land in order to get the agriculture going again.
One member of an international technical team deployed by CWS to work at agricultural problems was a young veterinarian from Cuba named David Villalonga. When he arrived, he found the cattle suffering from hoof and mouth disease and threatened with extinction. Vaccine was secured, and David began training Khmer workers to carry out an extensive vaccination program. Duplicated across the country, it will have a major effect on the health of the herds and the number of oxen available to work. It's a practical way of caring, of bringing hope to an otherwise hopeless situation. The program was important as a model, proving the practicality of training unskilled Khmers in veterinary methods. Now the government and the United Nations have begun large-scale veterinary programs, freeing Church World Service to create new directions for its program, as well as to start new programs. But even with healthy animals, the farmer cannot plant his fields if the irrigation canals are not repaired. During the war years, those canals that survived destruction washed full of dirt and grew full of vegetation. Now the existing canals must be upgraded, and those destroyed must be repaired. Canal building was undertaken during Pol Pot's time, but then it was under slave labor conditions upon threat of death. Some of the deeper canals claimed hundreds of lives and were never finished. The memory is still fresh. So today, reconstruction is a sensitive question. But now work has begun anew, carried out by Samaki groups organized from villages. Working hours are more reasonable. Adequate food is distributed. The fact that they are willingly at work reflects a new hope which overshadows the dark fears of yesterday. Heavy equipment is being supplied by European churches for repairing the larger dams and canals that feed the smaller ditches. But even before canal and dam reconstruction can begin, surveying must be done and maps drawn. Rodolfo Juarez is the second member of the international team fielded by CWS. He is a Methodist from Cuba, a lawyer and an engineer interested in agricultural hydrology.
And most of the work I have been doing is just surveying work, because in Cambodia you have to start on zero or below zero. You cannot say, give me a topographical map. It doesn't exist. You cannot say, give me information about the rain that falls every season or 1 month or 1 day. That it doesn't exist, information like that. So you have to start from zero. We just give up asking for too many things. Just we try to work with the little information we have, to be willing to solve the problem, not just to create a new one.
Today, Rodolfo is training individuals to operate the surveying equipment CWS has made available. His teams are drawing topographical maps of major portions of the country. Rodolfo has surveyed several large dams which need major repairs. The heavy equipment being brought in will also be under his direction and will be used to make these repairs. When Rodolfo returns to Cuba, he will leave behind a group of well-trained teams to carry on the task of surveying and repairing irrigation dams and canals. As the irrigation systems are restored, rice production will increase and less will be imported. Kampuchea is looking forward to the time when it will be the major exporter of rice that it once was. Today, the markets are often full of fish and vegetables. Whether Kampuchea will soon feed itself depends on both natural conditions and political stability. Both drought and vast flooding can affect a crop in one growing season. And unless the farmers are free to farm the land, this hope for self-sufficiency is in vain. But there is new hope in Phnom Penh as well as in the countryside. Under Pol Pot, this city of 3 million was emptied at gunpoint. Today, families have moved back into town. Few have electricity, running water, or sanitation systems. But the city is busy. Goods are being bought and sold. Phnom Penh is again a city on the move, a city with hope. Schools throughout the country have been reopened. Under Pol Pot, all schools were closed. Educational materials were destroyed. This school served as an animal shelter. Others were used to store grain. Still others were simply demolished. Today, classes are held in spite of severe shortages of education materials. To help Kampuchea with its educational needs, the churches, through their system of interchurch aid, have contributed school supplies. Besides traditional education, children engage in recreation and sports and learn agricultural and industrial methods. Agricultural self-sufficiency is a priority of the government. When the relief shipments end, it will mean the difference between people eating and not eating, so everyone is taught the basis of gardening. The churches have also contributed toolkits. With the toolkits, students are taught carpentry by rebuilding school desks and chairs. This provides them with a marketable skill when their schooling is finished. In the industrial sector of Kampuchea, there is a shortage of almost everything. This textile factory has taken parts from about 1/2 of its machines to make the other half work. There are no new parts. Raw materials are scarce. This factory, like most others, operates until supplies are gone, then shuts down while it waits for more. Since most industrial managers and factory workers were killed by Pol Pot, new workers must now be trained. It takes time to rebuild such a depleted labor supply. The churches have supplied materials here too, and sent engineers to assess the needs for getting full production going. Despite its problems, Kampuchea is edging toward recovery. But the road is long and difficult, and the way has many pitfalls. Aiding the people on their journey down the road are the faithful oxen, the source of power for agriculture and transportation. Their harnesses are often decorated with a variety of brass bells. It is pleasant both to the ear and to the eye. The urge to adorn the ox and the will of the Khmer people to turn past tragedy into a foundation for the future merges here in the old provincial capital of Udong. Spent shell casings, reminders of the deaths of fathers, sons, and husbands, are collected. Cottage industries have begun which turn these instruments of death into bells for oxen. Their pleasant sound serves as a reminder of the dreadful past, but also speaks of the transformation of despair into hope. It takes intense fire to turn shells into bells. Having come through the fire of oppression, the Khmer people now look forward to a future of peace and prosperity. And so today, the dance expresses both joy and sorrow. For in Kampuchea, one does not exist without the other. Its renewal is a sign of hope, arising from the wretchedness of what they have just come through. By reclaiming the best of the past, the people are charting a new direction for the future.